Today, Kasoma Farouk of Uganda is navigating the Mediterranean Sea, where we are going to see the war between France and the rest of Europe. In other words, what led to the war between France and the rest of Europe? We are saying today, the situation in France after the declaration of the new constitution in September 1791 became worse. From 1792, France found herself at war with the rest of European countries. On 20th April 1792, the Legislative Assembly declared war on Austria, and immediately Prussia decided to join Austria and fight against the Frenchmen. And fight against the what? The Frenchmen. So we are looking at a war with the rest of Europe. Nations allied together to fight against a country called what? France. So we are challenging minds. What caused the war between France and the rest of Europe? Number one, the activities of the French immigrants in the neighboring countries. So we are saying today, the activities of the French immigrants, these were relatives and friends of Louis XVI. When the things were not moving on well, they were harbored in Austria. They were planning to come back and overthrow the revolutionary government. It is this that annoyed the revolutionary government. By this time, it had to launch a war against Austria because Austria was harboring the immigrants, which immigrants were planning to declare war on the revolutionary France. So the activities of the French immigrants who wanted to come back and overthrow the revolutionary government, this annoyed the revolutionary government. What the revolutionary government did was to declare war against other European countries. That is Austria and Prussia. And of course, Britain had to join them. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Because these immigrants who were relatives and friends to Louis XVI, who were harbored in Austria, were planning to come back and overthrow the government. So what the government did was to declare war against Austria. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Another one, the nature of the Legislative Assembly government. It is said the new government in France, Legislative Assembly, was full of younger men who were driven with honor and privilege. They wanted to prove that they are strong. They were immature younger men who wanted to prove that they are great. What they did, they decided to declare war against Austria. Against which country? Austria. And by this time, it is this that led to the war between France and the rest of what? Europe. Because the new government, Legislative Assembly government, was full of younger men who were driven with courage. They wanted to prove that they are strong. So they had to declare war against Austria. And Austria had to be supported by Prussia, which led to the war between France and the rest of what? The rest of Europe. Another one, the success of the 1789 French Revolution. We are saying today, when the French Revolution succeeded, the revolutionaries in France were saying they were willing to support other countries, also to stage what? Revolutions. Because they were willing to support other countries, also to stage revolutions in their countries. This annoyed other countries. What other countries did was to join hands together to declare war against a country called what? France. So we are looking at a war between France and the rest of the rest of Europe. Then the hostility or enmity of the European countries towards the revolutionary France. It is seen other European countries, Prussia, Britain, Austria, were enemies to the revolutionary what? France. They didn't want the revolutionary France because they didn't want France to be led by a president. What they did, they joined hands together to fight against a country called what? France. Because they were enemies to the new government in where? In France. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Nations allied together to fight against a country called what? Called France. Another one, the Brunswick Manifesto of July 1792. What happened? It is said the Brunswick Manifesto. Brunswick was an Austro-Prussian commander. He wrote a manifesto and said he was willing to declare war against France if France went ahead to mistreat the supporters of Louis XVI. When Brunswick issued a manifesto, this annoyed the revolutionary France. The revolutionary France had to declare war against Prussia and Austria. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. We are saying Brunswick was saying, if the revolutionary government went ahead to mistreat the supporters of Louis XVI, they were going to declare war against it. Now what happened? The revolutionary government had to declare war against Prussia and Austria. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Then the commercial or economic interest. It is said some European countries had to join the war against France because of economic interest. For example, it is said in this kind of arrangement that Britain didn't want its economic interests to be threatened. Because Britain didn't want its economic interests to be threatened, what it did, Britain had to join Prussia and Austria, and they had to declare war against which country? Against a country called what? France. Then the rise of the Girondins party. Let me tell you today, the Girondins party, this was a political party formed in the game of the French Revolution of 1789. When the Girondins was formed, its core objective was to promote the greatness of a country called what? France. So by this time, the Girondins party led to the war between France and the rest of Europe, because the Girondins wanted the ideas of the French Revolution to go in other European what? Countries. And by this time they decided to support a war between France and the rest of Europe, because they wanted the ideas of the French Revolution, that is liberty, equality and fraternity, also to go in other European what? Countries. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Another one, the declaration of France as a republic on 22nd September 1792. We are saying today, when France was declared a republic meant that it was supposed to be led by a president. Led by a what? A president. Other European countries were not happy to see France to be led by a president. And by this time, they decided to join hands together. That is Britain, Austria, Prussia, against France, because they didn't want France to be led by a president. So I can tell you, the year 1792 to 99, there was a war between France and the rest of Europe. Then the death of Leopold II of Austria. it is said the death of Leopold II of Austria. Leopold II was not happy the way his friend Louis XVI's brother-in-law was being mistreated. But for him, he didn't support a war. But when Leopold died, he was succeeded by his son Francis II. A man who came to power, Francis II. For him, he was supporting a war between France and the rest of Europe. And this led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Very important. Another one, the territorial ambitions. Territorial what? Ambitions. Where we are saying today, countries, France had to launch a war because it was sure that if it defeated the countries, it was going to get territories. So the territorial ambitions led to the war between France and the rest of Europe, whereby this time countries that joined this war thought that after winning the war, they were going to get what? Territories. So the territorial ambitions led to the war between France and the rest of Europe. Another one, the need by the revolutionaries in France to export the revolutionary ideas. We are saying today, the revolutionaries wanted to export the revolutionary ideas.